The United Nations Security Council holds closed meeting on Yemen today. Millions of people around the globe face reduction in food aid due to funding crisis. International Red Cross warns contamination of Yemen's explosives is among the worst in the world. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Shazza Abdelbay. The United Nations Security Council holds a closed session on Yemen today. The UN envoy Hans Grunberg is to brief the council members on the latest peace efforts made by his office. Other briefers scheduled to address the council are the representative of the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs and the head of the UN mission to support the Hudaydah Agreement. Saudi Defense Minister Prince Khalid bin Salman phone called the chairman of the Yemeni Presidential Leadership Council, Rashad al-Alimi. The two sides discussed the latest developments in Yemen. They also discussed a number of issues of common interest. Prince Khalid affirmed the kingdom's continued support for the Yemeni Presidential Leadership Council and to reach a comprehensive political solution to the conflict. The United Nations warned that millions of people around the world face reduction in food aid due to funding crisis. Despite repeated calls from the UN for donors to bridge such a big funding gap, only a small amount has been paid. This puts millions of people at risk of hunger. This report has more details.
The United Nations has been forced to limit food, cash payments, and aid to millions of people in several countries due to a crippling funding crisis that has seen donations drop by roughly half while acute hunger reaches record levels. The World Food Programme reports that cutbacks have either occurred or are imminent in at least 38 of the 86 countries where the WFP has operations. While the WFP's operating requirement is $20 billion to deliver aid to everyone in need, it was aiming for between $10 billion and $14 billion, which was what the agency had received in the past few years. So far this year, the organization has received about half of that, or around $5 billion. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the conflict in Ukraine and its worldwide ramifications, humanitarian needs were skyrocketing in 2021 and 2022. While these drivers are still present, finance is becoming less and less available. This year, 345 million people remain extremely food insecure, with hundreds of millions more at risk of worsening hunger. Conflict and insecurity remain the primary drivers of acute hunger around the world, along with climate change, unrelenting disasters, persistent food price inflation, and mounting debt stress. The WFP is looking to diversify its funding base, but it's also urged donors to step up their efforts. In Yemen, a huge funding gap will force the WFP to cut aid to 7 million people as early as August. Cutting aid to people at the hunger level of crisis to help save those literally starving or in the category of catastrophic hunger means that those dropped will rapidly slip into the emergency and catastrophe categories. World leaders must prioritize humanitarian funding and invest in long-term solutions to the conflict, poverty, development, and other root causes of the current crisis.
خلي الأطفال يأكلوا وأني أرقد أمسك على بطني واربطها بالمقرمة وارقد لأن الجاهل ما يتحملش مثلي أنا أقدر أتحمل. كنا معانا غنم ومعانا بقر لما نجوع نروح نبيع قراش من القراش ونشتري الدقيق ونشتري السكر ونشتري الشاهي يعني كنا الله بحمده وشكره. نشرب حليب من الغنم نشرب حليب من البقر والله ما له الحمد ونسقي الجهال وكانوا الجهال مرتاحين أحسن الراحة. بس الآن كل شيء المواضيع زلقة. غير كانوا يضربوا له فوقنا بوازيك لجنب البيوت لما اهتزينا البيوت هزينا نفسنا هربنا بعنا حقنا القراش الغنم البقر مزحنا بحقنا البيس والحمد لله.
The joint forces defended Houthi infiltration attempts west of Taiz. The military media reported that they ram-backed Houthi militia pushed dozens of its fighters in the early hours of dawn in an attempt to position in a strategic area overlooking the front lines. It added that the units stationed by the joint forces dealt with the Houthis and forced them to flee after achieving direct casualties in their ranks. The Iranian-backed Houthi militia intensified campaigns to recruit children in areas under its control. Local sources said that the militia called hundreds of young men in Hajjah and Hudaydah to join the so-called obligatory mobilization. These young men were transferred to militia camps in Sana'a, Amran, and other areas. Massam announced clearing of 13 destroyed schools from the mines laid by the Houthi militia. The mines affected about 6,000 students and caused the displacement of a large number of educational staff to other governorates. The International Committee of the Red Cross warned that Yemen is suffering from one of the highest rates of contamination with mines and other explosive remnants of the war in the world. The director of the Middle East operations at the Red Cross said that Yemen is among the 3 countries most affected by explosives. This report has more details.
The International Committee of the Red Cross has warned that 9 years after the start of the civil war, Yemen has one of the world's worst rates of contamination with landmines and other explosive devices. The impoverished Arab country, which was thrown into turmoil when the Iran-backed Houthi rebels seized the capital in September 2014, is one of the 3 worst-hit nations, according to the ICRC. Experts believe that at least 1 million mines have been installed in Yemen over the country's years of unrest, presenting a daily threat alongside unexploded shells and other war debris. Since March 2015, a Saudi-led military coalition has been fighting the Houthis in a conflict that has killed hundreds of thousands due to direct and indirect factors such as famine. According to the UN-affiliated Civilian Impact Monitoring Project, landmines and exploded shells and other war remnants killed 1,469 civilians in the last 5 years. Children in Yemen are in danger of coming into contact with landmines and explosive remnants of war while going about their daily lives, gathering firewood and water and tending to livestock, and they may lack the ability to detect or avoid said landmines. After conducting a series of interviews last year, the ICRC discovered that 20% of livestock owners in 2 districts near front lines had explosive contamination on their properties. According to another ICRC study, 70% had lost livestock to landmines and other explosives. Fighting in Yemen has significantly subsided since a UN-brokered ceasefire went into force in April 2022 and has generally maintained even after the agreement expired in October 2022. A Chinese-mediated reconciliation between regional powers Iran and Saudi Arabia, 8 years after they severed ties, has also given Yemen optimism. But even if peace is restored, sweeping the land of explosives would take several years and demand considerable resources, expertise, and technology.
Houthis use religious occasions to impose more taxes on people. The Houthi militia forced people in Sada to pay 3,000 riyals for each family under the pretext of supporting the celebration of Prophet Muhammad's birthday. This report has more details.
The Houthi militia uses religion as a card in order to reach its interests. The Houthi militia's keenness to celebrate the Prophet's birthday annually is not considered a tribute to the messenger, peace be upon him, as it claims, but rather to serve corrupt personal and sectarian purposes. In addition to turning these occasions into collection seasons, the militia turned them into a propaganda means to show off its muscles and hollow popularity, and a promotional platform for its authoritarian project and its pledge of allegiance to Al-Houthi, the guardian of Muslims, as they claim. The Houthi militia exploit the Prophet's birthday to devote its ideology committed to Iranian Shiite and spreading extremist sectarianism, in addition to exploiting the Prophet's birthday to mobilize for its fronts, using mosques and schools. It aims to incite sectarianism in society by brainwashing children through teaching those sectarian lessons and introducing Houthi slogans in school morning assemblies, then subjecting them to its cultural courses in preparation for sending them to the fronts. The Houthi militia also organizes weekly and daily events and celebrations through neighborhood leaders, not out of love of the Holy Prophet, but to persuade citizens to denote more money. These deceptive celebrations come within the framework of the so-called annual program of Houthi events, which is based on imposing new levies on shops, schools, and universities, and mobilizing the largest number of recruits.
Coming next in the news. More than 6,000 Somali refugees voluntarily returned from home to Yemen. Welcome back. The United Nations announced that it helped dozens of Somali refugees in Yemen to return to their country, as more than 6,000 Somali refugees returned to their home from Yemen. This report has more details.
In the latest departure, a boat carrying 150 Somali refugees left the port of Aden last night and arrived at the port of Berbera on Sunday, 10 September. The voluntary returns are part of UNHCR's Assisted Spontaneous Return program. For the first time, 26 Somali refugees residing in the north of the country were assisted to join this boat departure. The program is facilitated by UNHCR in cooperation with humanitarian partners and authorities in Yemen and Somalia. Those wishing to return home are assisted by UNHCR and partners. They are helped with medical screening, documentation, transportation, and financial support in Yemen to facilitate the journey, as well as return and reintegration assistance in Somalia. UNHCR manages a return help desk that Somali refugees can visit to receive counseling and get registered. During the process, the staff counsels each family to ensure that their decision is voluntary and well-informed. UNHCR informs them that if they have any concerns, they can change their minds at any time before departure. Yemen hosts the third largest Somali refugee population, around 65% of more than 71,000 refugees and asylum seekers registered with UNHCR. It is a long-standing refugee host.
Despite the ongoing conflict, the generosity of the Yemeni people in continuing to host refugees cannot be overstated. But after years of conflict, refugees are facing increased hardship and are struggling to cover basic needs. With Yemen being one of the world's largest humanitarian crises and civilians facing dire living conditions, the situation for refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants has deteriorated significantly. As a result, an increasing number of refugees have been approaching UNHCR for help in returning home, citing safety and security concerns and limited access to services. Nearly 1,500 Somali refugees have signed up for return to Somalia in 2023. 48 organized departures have now taken place from Yemen to Somalia since the inauguration of the program in 2017.
The British government announced a new contribution worth more than $18 million to improve the health situation of women and children in Yemen. UNICEF said the new contribution will help the organization improve access to basic healthcare services and strengthen water, mental health, and psychological support services for women and children. Yemenis across the country suffer from an increase of rent prices. This has plagued the people who are already facing hard living conditions due to the ongoing conflict. This report has more details.
At the end of every month, many of the Yemeni civilians are forced to sell one of their belongings to pay the rent for the house they live in. They fear that the day will come when they will have nothing to sell, and all that remains of the house's furniture is what the family sleeps on. The average rent of houses in Sana'a is 55,000 Yemeni riyals, equivalent to about $110, and every now and then the owners demand an increase. Most of Yemeni men have been working for several years in several daily wage jobs after their salaries have stopped 7 years ago, when they were working in public jobs. Now their daily wage is only sufficient for living requirements and children's study expenses, and as for the rent, they can only pay it by selling some of their properties. Residents in the capital Sana'a and in all Yemeni cities are suffering from a housing crisis and speculation in rental prices, accompanied by the interruption of public employee salaries, the expansion of unemployment, and the deterioration of the local currency. In Sana'a, the percentage of people living in rented housing is estimated at 75%. Despite the urban expansion that the city is witnessing, an expansion that was made possible by war economy funds, the huge increase in the number of buildings in various parts of the city did not contribute to alleviating the housing crisis, because these buildings were designed and prepared for the wealthy and are being rented for extremely high prices. The houses are blamed for not being serious about their allegations of fairness to tenants and their protection from landlords, as they have made adjustments to the law regulating the relationship between landlords and tenants, according to which it is forbidden to increase rents or evict the tenant as long as the rent is paid regularly. But this is only being implemented to a limited extent. The owners use many tricks to force tenants to leave their homes. They may claim that they are selling the houses or need it for their children's families or relatives, or want to renovate it. They also rent their houses without written contracts to avoid any commitments with the tenant. The housing crisis in Sana'a has worsened since the arrival of the displaced people of Hodeidah, and obtaining a two-room apartment has become almost impossible, which leaves the tenant facing difficult choices.
Here is a reminder of the main headlines. United Nations Security Council holds closed meeting on Yemen today. Millions of people around the globe face reduction in food aid due to UN funding crisis. International Red Cross warns contamination of Yemen's explosives is among the worst in the world. This is the end of the news. It was Shaza Abdelbai. Thank you for watching.